Hey guys, it's Prince Rich with Rich Technology Group, and in today's video we're going to talk about what is the best router for your hosted voice over IP phone system. For those of you watching, this video is for those of you who may already have an existing voice over IP phone system and you're thinking about doing a network upgrade or something like that, and you're like, hey, I need to make sure I get a router that's not going to cause conflict. Or for those of you who may be watching this, may be in a position where it's time to get a new phone system and you're debating or realizing that, hey, I'm going to have to make some upgrades to my network. We might need a new router, a new switch, new wiring, whatever. The purposes of this video is specifically going to be for me to give you guys advice. And this is good advice. This is advice that's going to be based on things that I've personally seen in the field for the installs that we've done nationwide, remotely, and on site. I'm going to be giving you guys advice on not only how to pick the best router, but how to know for sure that your router is going to cause you the least bit of problems to your phone system. Before we get into this, I want to be clear and just say, while there may be rumors out there going around that says things like, oh, voice over IP isn't reliable and things like that, that's not true. I'm here to tell you, as somebody who's experienced with this, that has worked on literally hundreds of voice over IP installations for dozens of different carriers. I've seen the issues, and I can tell you, 99.5% of the time when there's a problem with your voice over IP phone system, whether it be call breakup, drop calls, failed transfers, one-way voice, drop conference calls, whatever it may be, 99.5% of the time it is network related. 90% of the time, of that 99.5% of the time, it is because of your router. So, enough of that. I'm going to get into some pointers and some things that I suggest you do during the process of router selection for either that existing or that new phone system, so that you can ensure that you have as little problems with the phone system as possible and the router plays nice with your new communications platform. So, tip number one, I recommend all of you check with the service provider. So for example, if you're like us and you're using, say, Vonage Business, or you're thinking about using Vonage Business, Nextiva, RingCentral, all of them, they have dedicated web pages for what they typically will call something along the lines of the trusted device list or something like that. And then they have what they call the blacklist. Basically, you want to make sure that the router that you're looking at, the brand, make, and model in question, is not on the blacklist. If it's on the blacklist, I can pretty much promise you it may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. It may not even be 6 months from now when problems start arising, but you will start to have strange, unexplained, unusual problems with your phone system communication. Once it happens, you can rest assured it's the router. The reason I wanted to throw that time thing out there is because I hear people say all the time, well, I bought this router like 6 months ago, so it can't be the router because we just now started having this issue. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you guys a quick story. I actually had a saleswoman that worked overseas in Costa Rica at one point, about a year ago. The people that she was staying with, when she was living in Costa Rica, working remotely, doing inside sales for the company, when I was working with her to set up her phone remotely and make sure that I could contact her and my administrative assistant could contact her and we could transfer calls and that she could dial and receive calls correctly, I asked her, I said, what type of router do you have over there at this house? Unfortunately, she had no control over the router because she was staying at somebody's place for approximately 8 months in Costa Rica. So she couldn't just come into their house and switch their internet provider and switch the router. She had to roll with the flow and go with whatever they had, and we understood that. But when she told me the model of what they had, which was a Netgear, and that's not to knock Netgear, we love Netgear, but Netgear does have some routers that are on the blacklist for many carriers. I found out when I went to Vonage's website and went to their trusted list that particular Netgear was a no-go. Found out right then and there it was a no-go. It was just bad. So I told her, I said, hey, you may not have any problems immediately, but let's just see what happens. And then we'll deal with the bridge when we get to that point. The funny thing is she was in Costa Rica for approximately, at the time, I misspoke. She was only there for 3 months initially in Costa Rica, staying with these friends of hers. And when she was there, she had no problems. She worked for me and did sales for me for approximately 3 months. No issues, no problems. She then went back to the United States, to California, where she lived. Stayed there for about another like 4 months, and then she came back to Costa Rica again for a much longer extended stay for approximately 6 months. Same place. We left everything pre-hooked up and pre-set up the same way so that her IP phone, which was a Cisco, was plug and play. She comes back and she plugs into that same router. Everything worked fine for a couple of weeks, but after about like 3 weeks or so, it got really bad. Dropped calls, two-way voice, a lot of static. It was so bad, I told her she had to stop working, unfortunately, until I was able to ship a router to her that was on Vonage's approved list, and then set it up for her remotely because, how could we possibly sell somebody a phone system if we're trying to sell a phone system and we sound horrible saying, hey, this Vonage system is a great system. We use it too. You know what I'm saying? So my point is, so that I don't beat a dead horse on point number one, because we still got many points to go. My point is if you get the wrong router, don't think just because that router was on a blacklist or because it may or may not be incompatible, do not think for 1 minute that thing won't eventually start acting up. If it's on a blacklist, I can promise you, if you plan on having the phone system for more than a year or so, you are going to run into an issue where it gets so bad that router is going to have to be replaced. So check like I said, every provider, Nextiva, RingCentral, Vonage Business, 8x8, Jive, the list goes on. They all have some sort of wiki or something on their website that basically says something along the lines of, here is our trusted device list, and here is our do not buy, like absolutely under any circumstances blacklist. If you're not sure what that is or where you can find your provider's list, drop me an email. I'm more than happy to find it for you. It would take me just a couple of seconds to send you that over. I'd love to help in any way I can and spare you from potential hardware disaster. Number 2, make sure whatever router you are going to get has the ability to turn off something called SIP ALG, and that's spelled SAIP space ALG. Let me explain because I don't really fully even still know the purposes of SIP ALG. I just know from working with the carriers and seeing lots of issues and ups and downs, SIP ALG under all circumstances needs to be cut off. If you don't turn SIP ALG off in the router, I assure you it will cause problems. Typically, it is almost immediately, at least within a week or a matter of months, you will guaranteed see everything from drop calls, call breakup. The most common issues that I've seen when SIP ALG is turned on is dropped calls that drop with no rhyme or reason or with any sort of pattern. Sometimes call breakup, but not usually call breakup with SIP ALG being turned on. Call breakup is usually something with just a bad router, firewall, or just traffic issues on your network. Typically what I see is dropped calls, failed transfers when SIP ALG is not cut off, and some other weird issues too, where like people can't dial out, but people can call in, or vice versa. An entire office can receive calls but not make calls, or the other way around. So that needs to be cut off. Now, something that I want to throw out there, because I know you're asking, how do I know if SIP ALG is even possibly able to be cut off in my router? Easy. You need to go online and try to find the user manual for the router that in question, whether it's the one that you have or the one you're thinking about buying. Typically, those user manuals are going to be in PDF. A PDF is a searchable form. So whether you're using a Mac or a Chromebook or a PC, it doesn't matter. This should be universal. Open that PDF up. If you're using a Chromebook or a PC, hit Control F for find. It should open up a box where you can search the document and type in SAIP spacebar ALG and search that document. If you cannot find anything in that user manual that has SIP ALG in it, you can rest assured that the function is not able to be cut off in the router. Now let me explain something that's really important. By default, most routers, residential and like commercial grade routers, SIP ALG is a protocol that is turned on. So you can pretty much assume if you don't see the ability to cut SIP ALG off in a router, it means it is on, which is a bad thing. My point is, stay away from any routers that do not have the ability to turn off SIP ALG. If a router has the ability to turn it off, that's a good thing because you absolutely need it off or it will trash your voice over IP phone system traffic all day long, all week long. If you don't see the ability to cut it off, walk away. Just assume it's a blacklisted non-VOIP. It is a non-voice over IP phone system friendly router. Point number 3, do you need PoE or what we call power over Ethernet? Basically, if you are a smaller business, this will probably more so apply, what I'm going to get into here. Because if you're a bigger business, typically, even if your router doesn't support PoE, you may have purchased an additional switch that's all PoE, like a 24-port PoE switch, managed switch or gigabit switch, or a 20 or a 48-port switch. For those of you who are smaller businesses and don't know what this is, or for those of you who are watching that are bigger businesses and don't know what this is, most IP phones these days support what's called PoE. What that means is there is a plug on the back of it that looks like a normal internet plug, an Ethernet plug, but it supports the ability for you to be able to have a router or a what we call a PoE injected device on the other end that pushes power to the phone. This means that you can get a PoE compatible phone, and even though the phone may have an adapter, like an electrical plug that plugs into the electrical part of the phone and then into the wall, if you're using a PoE capable switch or router, it feeds electricity up the Ethernet cable. So you can use an Ethernet cable to not only get your data, your internet to the phone, but you also have electricity going up it. It's good for a lot of offices that don't like a lot of clutter or like to stay clean or don't like a lot of wires in the way and things like that. It's a good low maintenance solution. So that being said, picking the right PoE router. Something that I want to throw out there is, number 1, it needs to be gigabit. Number 2, you need to double check, and sometimes this can be tricky because the way that it's worded when you purchase some of these routers, it'll say PoE router, okay? But it won't say how many ports on that router are PoE. I see a lot of routers that say PoE, but then when you get them out of the box, or then when you dig deeper on Amazon or wherever it is that you're getting the router from, Newegg or whatever it may be, you see on there 4 ports, 1 port PoE, or it'll say 1x PoE, which means 1 port is PoE. If you see a router that says 4 ports, 4x PoE, that means that the router has 4 ports that you can use to plug into phones or devices, but they're all power over Ethernet capable. So check that and make sure that you check the description, the deeper details, or what we call the additional information for that router, and make sure that all the ports on that router are PoE. And also make sure the phones that you've got support PoE, because if you get a router that's PoE and your phones don't support PoE, well, you're still up the creek without a paddle. The good news is nowadays, most phones, especially Cisco's, Polycom's, and some of the other newer popular ones that are coming out like Link, they do support PoE. If you're looking at a phone that's not a really common phone, like one that I hadn't just mentioned, you need to double check with whoever the supplier is, or drop me an email and say, hey, Prince, here's my model number. Is this PoE? And I'll check for you. Point number 4, make sure that your router is gigabit. It's the 21st century, guys. Nobody's using 10100 anymore. To get the most bandwidth and also make sure that you're getting the best throughput on your phone, as well as your network to your internet, which ensures that you have the best call quality without breakup and things like that, and you've got the biggest pipe of bandwidth for packets to pass back and forth as they need to freely, there's no point in getting a 10100 switch or something like that versus a gigabit because you're going to bottleneck the capability of your phone and your network. Make sure that your router is gigabit. More importantly, back to what we just discussed in the previous point about PoE, sometimes you'll see the quick gimmick where some of these router manufacturers will say, hey, this is a 4-port router, but only 1 port is gigabit. So check the additional information details and make sure that that router is all ports gigabit. Make sure it says, 4x gigabit or something like that so that you know you've got all gigabit ports on the router. Number 5, and this is the last final point, you get what you pay for. I understand a lot of you that are watching this, you may be running a nonprofit, you may be a startup business, you may be, you may have been in business for a long time, but because of the product that you sell or the way that you operate financially, you don't have a lot of expendable cash. I get it. We're the same way. We've been in business for forever. We don't have money like Donald Trump or something like that. But I'm going to tell you guys now, again, as somebody who has worked in the field and seen a lot of serious problems as well as a lot of serious great successes, you get what you pay for in the computer and networking equipment world. Don't get the really, really cheap router. If you see, like, let's say, for example, a Netgear PoE gigabit switch, that's everything that I described you should get in a router, that you can turn off SIP ALG and it's on your provider's trusted router or trusted device list. And let's say, for example, it's $189, but then you see some other thing by some other brand, which we won't mention, that's, let's say, $70, don't do it. You get what you pay for, guys. I'm not saying go out there and buy the most expensive router on the market, but don't go cheap. You will pay for it in the long run. Ask yourself, how much of that, 50% less than the better router is worth it to you if your staff cannot function for, let's say, 2 to 3 days and the phones don't work because you're having to wait for Amazon or whoever that you bought this router from to send you a new piece of equipment that's on the trusted list, and you're having to pay your IT guy to come in and charge you his hourly rate for a day to be able to set it up and reconfigure all your computers and all that stuff to the new router as well as your phones. Don't do it, guys. Get a good router. Like I said, don't get the most expensive Cisco or whatever you see on the market, but don't go cheap. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Don't do it. Some points that I want to throw out there, just some brands to be aware of, and this isn't necessarily trashing these brands because, as we all know, it's not only the same with computer equipment, it's the same with cars. Every brand has their duds, so I'm going to throw some brands out there and just some points that you need to understand that's kind of universal across some other brand routers as well as hosted voice over IP carriers. So a few brands I want to mention and throw some information behind. Netgear. Netgear is a great company. We have used them for a long time. I typically recommend, sadly, I used to recommend Netgear routers and switches for just about everything, especially for hosted IP. They had some of the best switches out there as well as routers, but recently Netgear made this strange change where I can't remember if it's the routers or the switches. I think it's the routers. Netgear still does switches, but they got completely out of the router game. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. All I know is we had great luck with them over the years. If you happen to come across a Netgear router and it is on a trusted list for your provider, get it. Netgear, for what you get, the ease of configuration in their interface, which we've always liked, which is very user-friendly, the quality of the router and the longevity, and the fact that you can typically turn off SIP ALG in most Netgear routers, and it's also usually, most Netgear routers, but not all, are on the carrier's trusted list. If you see one that meets all the descriptions that I just mentioned, don't ask questions, get it. They're priced well for what you get and the package and the quality and reliability that you get. You really can't argue with the prices. But again, make sure it's on the trusted list for your provider because there is a handful of Netgears out there that will cause you some pain and suffering with your phone system in the office. Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti is a house favorite over here at Rich Technology Group. We've got hundreds of customers that use Ubiquiti, not just for our phone system stuff, but even people we worked with in the past for very complex networking setups, like for government setups and even for like nonprofit setups and for incubator setups where we had people doing shared office space and things like that. Netgear is a great product that has Cisco grade level capabilities, features, and security without the Cisco price. So that's a good thing. We recommend Ubiquiti. Here's the kicker. Ubiquiti is not on a lot of carriers' trusted list. And the reason Ubiquiti is not on the carrier's trusted list is not because it doesn't work. I have personally ran into a lot of higher level technicians at some of these carriers that have told me, hey, we've actually got Ubiquitis in our lab and it works flawlessly with our phone system. But the problem is that their interface is really, really complex for a lot of our technicians, and we just can't support it. When our technicians get on the phone with a customer, it's kind of like they don't know how to handle the customer or how to handle the situation because they quite simply, honest to God, don't understand the Ubiquiti interface. It is complex, and it's very different from what most of you have seen in a Linksys or Netgear or a D-Link or one of those other more common brands that you might see in a business. So understand, if you get a Ubiquiti, while it may work just fine with your hosted carrier, if you run into problems where you need to get the carrier to help you do some configuration, say in the firewall or with some advanced features, most of those guys are not going to be able to help you. So you'd be on your own. So really my unofficial disclaimer for Ubiquiti routers is if you're somebody that's watching this that's like the director of IT for the company, or you're like, you're a big dog when it comes to IT, you're like head of IT or something like that for the company, I would just place a call to the provider and say, hey, does this Ubiquiti play nice? This Ubiquiti model play nice with the phone, with you guys' phone system? And if they say yes, and you feel confident in configuring that Ubiquiti router on your own without any input from anybody else, go for it. We've seen Ubiquiti equipment work well with voice over IP carriers with no issues for years on end. We've just seen issues where the carriers can't support it because of the complexity of some of these Ubiquiti devices. So that's my 2 cents there on Ubiquiti. TPLink. I hate to do this, guys, because we used to be a TP-Link dealer. I mean, we kind of still are, but we don't sell it because of the reasons I'm going to mention. TP-Link has terrible, terrible reviews across Amazon, across pretty much anything that you look at for them. I'm just going to straight out say it. If you're an IT professional or somebody who's in charge of making the IT decisions or purchasing the IT equipment, stay away from TP-Link. Not only have we seen that company trash voice over IP traffic of all different types of carriers, we have had some serious issues where even when we're able to prove to TP-Link corporate or to their warranty division that the reason the phone system and everything else in the office is not working correctly is because of their device, they don't honor warranty, they're not really good about wanting to replace their equipment, and even when they do replace the equipment or send you another one overnight for free, it doesn't matter because it doesn't play nice with just about any phone system on the market. I highly recommend you stay away from that brand. If you're somebody that's watching this video that's using a TP-Link with a hosted IP phone system and you're having great luck, please, by all means, comment in the thing below. We would love to know the secret. But the scenarios that we've encountered, we typically had to either help or assist the customer in just throwing the TP-Link out the window and getting a whole new router of choice, and then the problems subsided. So anyways, that concludes this video. For those of you that are watching, if you're not sure what router may be the best for your new phone system or for your existing phone system, drop me an email. I'm more than happy to help and do the 2 to 5 minutes of research to find out which one would work with your carrier or your system. If you're somebody that's watching this right now and you don't have a hosted voice over IP phone system and you not only need help with figuring out what router and network equipment will work right with the phone system, but you need advice on what phone systems are best out there, remember, we represent all hosted VOIP carriers on the market. Our consulting service is free. Give me a shout and let me know how I can help you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.